I'm Ladonna, 37 years old, and I never imagined I'd be standing in knee-deep December snow watching my own father throw my last suitcase out the front door of what used to be my childhood home. My stepmother Diane stood behind the frosted window, her lips curled in that familiar smirk that had haunted me for 15 years. As I bent down to gather my scattered belongings, my hands weren't shaking from the cold. They were trembling with the weight of the secret tucked inside my coat pocket, an eviction notice that would soon wipe that smile off her face forever. Before I continue this incredible story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you someone who's dealt with toxic family members? Have you ever been falsely accused by people you trusted? Please hit that like button if you believe in karma and don't forget to subscribe, because what happens next will absolutely blow your mind. This story proves that sometimes the best revenge is served ice cold, just like that December snow. The story really began 3 weeks earlier when I returned home for my mother Grace's funeral. I hadn't set foot in this town for 15 years, not since I was 22, and my father chose his new wife over his own daughter. You see, back then, I was working in my father Howard's hardware store, learning the family business, planning to take it over one day. That was before Diane came into our lives like a tornado wrapped in designer clothes and false charm. She married my father just 6 months after meeting him at some business conference, bringing along her two adult children, Brett and Melissa, who were nothing but leeches looking for their next host. The reason I left wasn't just teenage drama or simple step-family friction. Diane had orchestrated something far more sinister. Money had been disappearing from the store's accounts, inventory was going missing, and somehow I became the prime suspect. Diane had planted evidence, manipulated the books, and convinced my father that his own daughter was stealing from him. The real thief was her son Brett, but by the time the truth would have come out, the damage was done. My father looked me in the eye and called me a thief, a disappointment, and told me to never come back. So I didn't, not for 15 years. During those years away, I built something amazing in California. Starting with nothing but determination and a broken heart, I created a successful real estate investment company. I learned the business from the ground up, made smart investments, and by 37, I was managing a portfolio worth millions. But success felt hollow without family, without the father who used to push me on the swing in our backyard, who taught me to ride a bike, who once called me his little princess. When I got the call that Mom had passed, I knew I had to come back, not for him, but for her. Mom and Dad had divorced quietly 5 years after I left. She never told me the details, just said she couldn't watch him destroy himself anymore. She moved to a small condo across town, and we rebuilt our relationship through phone calls and video chats. She never visited me in California, said she was too old for such long trips, but I think she was ashamed of how things had ended. She kept apologizing for not standing up for me back then, for not being stronger. I told her it wasn't her fault that Diane was a master manipulator, but I could see the guilt never left her eyes. Now I was back, staying temporarily in my childhood home, while I sorted through Mom's affairs and prepared to sell her condo. Diane had immediately started her poison campaign again, whispering to my father that I was only back for inheritance money, that I was probably planning to contest the will, that I couldn't be trusted. She conveniently forgot to mention that her precious Brett, now 40 and still living at home, had been steadily draining my father's retirement accounts. Or that Melissa, 35, with two kids from different fathers, was living there rent-free while contributing absolutely nothing to the household. The tension in the house was suffocating. Diane would make snide comments about my fancy California lifestyle and question how a thief could afford designer clothes. Brett would lurk around corners trying to overhear my phone conversations, probably hoping to find something to use against me. Melissa played the victim, always complaining about her hard life while scrolling through her phone all day, letting her kids run wild through the house. And my father, he seemed smaller, somehow older than his 72 years, with moments of confusion that worried me. Everything came to a head that morning at breakfast. I had just poured my coffee when Diane burst into the kitchen, tears streaming down her face, holding a jewelry box. "My grandmother's emerald bracelet is missing," she wailed. "The one worth $20,000. She clutched my father's arms, sobbing dramatically. "I found this in Ladonna's room when I was putting away laundry." She produced the bracelet from her pocket like a magician revealing their final trick. My father's face went from confusion to rage in seconds. He didn't ask questions, didn't want explanations, didn't even pause to wonder why Diane was doing laundry in my room. He just looked at me with those eyes that once held nothing but love and called me a thief again, ordered me out within the hour, said I was dead to him. The next hour was a blur of humiliation and fury. Howard, my own father, grabbed my suitcases and began throwing them out the front door into the snow. Each thud felt like another nail in the coffin of our relationship. "Get out!" he shouted, his face red with rage. "I should have known you'd never change. Once a thief, always a thief." Neighbors peered through their curtains, some even holding up phones to record the spectacle. Mrs. Anderson from next door, who used to give me cookies after school, shook her head sadly. Mr. Peterson, across the street, who taught me to fish when I was 8, looked away in embarrassment. Diane stood in the doorway like a queen, surveying her kingdom, occasionally dabbing at fake tears. I tried to give her a chance. "Howard," she said loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "But a leopard can't change its spots. Think of what she might have stolen that we haven't discovered yet." Brett appeared beside her, his phone out, taking photos and videos. "This is going on social media," he laughed. "Everyone should know what kind of person you really are." Melissa joined them, holding her youngest child, pretending to look concerned, but unable to hide the gleeful glint in her eyes. "It's so sad when family goes bad," she said dramatically. "My poor kids have to witness such ugliness." I gathered my belongings from the snow, my designer clothes now soaked and muddy, my dignity in tatters, but my resolve growing stronger with each passing second. As I loaded everything into my rental car, I caught my father's eye one last time. For just a moment, I saw something flicker there, maybe doubt, maybe regret. But Diane's hand on his arm pulled him back inside. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed through the neighborhood. As I drove away, I made one stop before heading to a hotel. Mom's bank, where she kept a safety deposit box she had mentioned in her final days. "Everything you need is in there," she had whispered. "I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you before, but I can now." The bank manager, Mr. Thompson, had been expecting me. He led me to a private room and left me alone with the box. Inside, I found several documents, but one made my heart stop. It was a deed to the house, my childhood home, and my name was on it. Not Howard's, not Diane's, mine. My hands shook as I read the attached letter in my mother's handwriting. "My dearest Ladonna," it began. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've probably had another confrontation with that woman. What I'm about to tell you will change everything. The house was never your father's to give. It belonged to my parents, and they left it to me when they died. I kept it in my name even after marrying Howard because something told me to protect it." The letter went on to explain that 3 years ago, when she noticed Howard's increasing confusion and memory problems, she had quietly transferred the deed to me. I knew Diane was drugging him, controlling him, but I couldn't prove it. I also knew she would try to take everything once he was too far gone to fight back. So I protected what I could. "The house is yours has been for 3 years. Use this power wisely, my dear." Also in this box, you'll find evidence of Diane and Brett's theft, bank statements, forged checks, and a business card for my lawyer, Mr. Peterson, not the fisherman, but his son. He has been waiting for your call. My mind reeled as I examined the other documents. Bank statements showing large withdrawals coinciding with Brett's new cars and gambling trips. Forged checks with my father's shaky signature. Medical records showing prescriptions for medications that cause confusion and memory loss prescribed by a doctor who happened to be Diane's cousin. Photos of Diane meeting with a man who wasn't my father time-stamped during their marriage. And then, the most shocking discovery, a private investigator's report showing Diane had been married before to a wealthy elderly man who died under suspicious circumstances, leaving everything to his children after Diane was caught embezzling. I sat in that small room for an hour, absorbing everything, planning my next move. Then I called Mr. Peterson. "I've been waiting for your call for 2 years," he said. "Your mother was a smart woman. She knew this day would come. Can you meet me at my office in an hour?" I agreed, gathered all the documents, and left the bank with a completely different perspective on my situation. The woman who had destroyed my relationship with my father, who had stolen 15 years of my life, who had just orchestrated my humiliation in front of the entire neighborhood, was living in my house. The eviction notice wasn't in my pocket yet, but it would be soon. Mr. Peterson's office was exactly what you'd expect from a small-town lawyer, wood paneling, leather chairs, and certificates covering the walls. But the man himself was sharp as a razor. "Your mother came to me 3 years ago." He began spreading out copies of all the documents. "She knew exactly what Diane was doing, but also knew your father wouldn't believe her. So she took legal steps to protect what she could. The deed transfer is ironclad. The house is yours free and clear. Diane has no claim to it, especially considering what else your mother discovered." He pulled out another folder thick with papers. "Diane Carson isn't even her real name. She's Diane Mitchell, and she's still legally married to a man in Nevada. Her marriage to your father is invalid." My jaw dropped. "She's a bigamist." Mr. Peterson nodded grimly. "Among other things, your mother hired a private investigator who uncovered quite a history. 3 elderly husbands, all wealthy, all left with nothing. She's wanted for fraud in 2 states. Your mother was building a case, but her health declined before she could act on it." He leaned back in his chair. "She also left you this." He handed me another envelope. Inside was a check for $500,000. Life insurance and her investment accounts. "She lived frugally these last years to leave you everything she could. Now let's discuss your options." I checked into the best hotel in town, needing space to think and plan my next moves carefully. The suite overlooked the snow-covered city, and as I stared out at the twinkling lights, I felt my mother's presence, her strength flowing through me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Justice for my mother, who lived in fear for my father, who was being slowly poisoned, and yes, for myself, the 22-year-old girl who was branded a thief and cast out. I opened my laptop and began making lists, phone calls, and appointments. First on the agenda was hiring the best private investigator money could buy to dig even deeper into Diane's past. Marcus Webb came highly recommended, a former FBI agent who specialized in financial crimes and elder abuse. "This is one of the worst cases I've seen," he said after reviewing the documents. "But I've seen this pattern before. These predators target vulnerable elderly people, isolate them from family, drain their resources, then move on to the next victim. The drugging to increase confusion is textbook. Give me 72 hours and I'll have everything you need." His confidence was reassuring, and his retainer fee was worth every penny if it meant exposing Diane for what she truly was. Next, I contacted a property management company to understand the eviction process. The lawyer there was amazed by my situation. "You've owned this house for 3 years and they've been living there without permission or paying rent?" she asked incredulously. "This is a straightforward case. We can have eviction notices served within 24 hours. Given the circumstances, particularly the elder abuse aspect, we might be able to expedite the process." She prepared all the necessary paperwork while I scheduled a meeting with Adult Protective Services about Howard's condition. The APS worker Linda Martinez took my concerns seriously. "The medication list you've shown me is alarming," she said, studying the medical records. "These drugs in combination can cause severe confusion, memory loss, and make someone highly susceptible to manipulation. If he's being given these without proper medical supervision, that's abuse. We'll need to do a welfare check, but given what you've shown me, we'll likely recommend immediate intervention. She gave me her direct number and promised to start the investigation immediately. Within 48 hours, Marcus Webb called with his preliminary findings, and they were worse than I imagined. Diane Mitchell has been married 4 times, never divorced, he reported. Her first husband died in a car accident after changing his will in her favor. Suspicious but never proven. The second, the one she's still married to, is in a nursing home in Nevada with advanced dementia. His children are still fighting to get power of attorney. The third died of a heart attack 2 weeks after marrying her, left her $300,000. Your father would be number 4. He paused, letting that sink in. But here's the interesting part. Brett isn't her biological son. She adopted him when he was 18 to help him avoid jail time for embezzlement. He's been her partner in crime ever since. Melissa is her biological daughter, has been on disability for 5 years, claiming a back injury, but I have video of her at a nightclub dancing just last week. There's more, Marcus continued. Brett has been using your father's business credit cards for cash advances, almost $200,000 over the past 5 years. He's got a serious gambling problem and owes money to some dangerous people. They've been calling the house looking for him. Diane's been moving money offshore. I found accounts in the Cayman Islands. She's preparing to run, probably planning to leave your father in a nursing home and disappear. We need to move fast. I thanked him and told him to keep digging while I prepared for the next phase. The eviction notices were ready by Thursday morning. I coordinated with the sheriff's department to have them served, while Howard was at his weekly doctor's appointment, ensuring Diane couldn't manipulate him in the moment. I parked across the street, watching as the sheriff's car pulled up. Deputy Rogers, whom I remembered from high school, knocked on the door. Diane answered, all smiles, until she saw the papers in his hand. The transformation was instantaneous. Her face went from charming housewife to cornered animal. "What is this?" she shrieked, her voice carrying across the neighborhood. "This is our house. You can't do this." Deputy Rogers remained professional. "Ma'am, according to county records, this house belongs to Ladonna Fitzgerald. You and all occupants have 30 days to vacate the premises. If you have any questions, you'll need to contact the property owner's attorney." He served papers to Brett and Melissa as well, both of whom had similar reactions of shock and rage. Brett made the mistake of getting aggressive, shoving Deputy Rogers and trying to grab the papers. Within seconds, he was in handcuffs, arrested for assaulting an officer. As they drove him away, Diane stood on the porch, screaming threats. "You won't get away with this. Howard will never let this happen. I'll destroy you." I watched her melt down with a strange sense of calm. This was just the beginning. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda at APS. "Welfare check scheduled for tomorrow. Bringing a nurse to evaluate medication situation. Be prepared for possible immediate action." Another text from Marcus. "Found 3 more victims in Florida, all alive and willing to testify. Diane's house of cards is about to collapse." As I drove back to my hotel, I couldn't help but smile. Mom always said the truth would set you free, but she never mentioned how good it would feel to be the one unlocking the chains. Diane's desperation manifested in increasingly erratic behavior over the next few days. Hotel security called me at 2 in the morning to report someone trying to break into my room. The camera footage showed Diane wearing all black, like some kind of amateur spy attempting to pick the lock with a bobby pin. When that failed, she tried to bribe the night clerk with $500 cash to let her in, claiming she was my mother and worried about me. The clerk thankfully followed protocol and called both security and the police. Diane was escorted off the property with a warning, but I knew this was far from over. She was like a wounded animal now, dangerous and unpredictable. By morning, my phone was flooded with notifications. Diane had gone on a social media rampage, posting on every platform imaginable. "Daughter from hell tries to steal elderly father's home," read one post, accompanied by old family photos she'd doctored to make me look sinister. She claimed I was a drug addict, a failed businesswoman drowning in debt, a pathological liar who had come back to destroy her family. She even created fake screenshots of supposed text messages from me threatening her. My business partners started calling concerned about the allegations. I had to spend hours on damage control providing them with the real story and legal documents to prove Diane's lies. Brett's behavior escalated after being released on bail the next day. Marcus Webb called to warn me. "He's been following you," he said. "My associate tailed him tailing you to the grocery store, the lawyer's office, even the cemetery where you visited your mother's grave. He's taking photos, probably trying to build some kind of case, or looking for an opportunity." Sure enough, when I returned to my rental car after meeting with Mr. Peterson, I found all 4 tires slashed and "thief" spray-painted across the windshield. The parking lot security camera caught Brett in the act, his face clearly visible as he vandalized my car with vengeful glee. But the real shock came when Marcus uncovered Brett's latest scheme. "He's been trying to access your accounts," Marcus reported. "He used information from your father's files to attempt password resets on your bank accounts, investment portfolios, even your business email. The fraud department at your bank caught it and froze everything pending verification. But here's the interesting part. He used a computer at the public library, and they have cameras. We've got him on video." This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was attempted identity theft and fraud. I gave Marcus the go-ahead to compile everything for the police. Then came the betrayal I didn't see coming. Melissa, sweet-looking Melissa who always played the victim, reached out through Facebook Messenger. "I need to talk to you," she wrote. "I have information about my mother that you need to know. She's planning something terrible. Meet me at the coffee shop on Main Street." Against my better judgment, but with Marcus's associate watching from nearby, I agreed to meet her. She showed up looking haggard, her usual perfect makeup replaced by dark circles and nervous energy. "I can't take it anymore," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "My mother is evil and I have proof, but I need something in return. I want $50,000, she continued, "and a guarantee that my kids and I can stay in the house for 6 months after everyone else is evicted. In exchange, I'll testify against my mother, provide documents showing her offshore accounts, and tell you where she hides the drugs she's been giving Howard." It was tempting, but something felt off. I told her I needed to think about it and would get back to her. As I left the coffee shop, I noticed her smirking at her phone. My instincts were right. That evening, I received an email from an anonymous account with an audio recording of our conversation and a demand for $100,000, or she would edit the recording to make it sound like I was bribing her to lie about her mother. The situation reached a boiling point when Howard, in a rare moment of clarity, discovered something disturbing. Linda from APS had done her welfare check and recommended reducing his medications under proper medical supervision. As the fog began to lift, Howard found his emergency stash of cash missing from his home safe, along with important documents and his late mother's jewelry. But more importantly, he found his medication hidden in Diane's drawer, doses clearly marked with times and dates, many showing he was being given double or triple the prescribed amount. He also found forged power of attorney documents waiting for his signature, essentially signing over everything to Diane. He called me, his voice shaking with a mixture of confusion and growing awareness. "Ladonna, I think I need help." He said the first kind words he'd spoken to me in 15 years. "Something's not right here. Can you meet me?" We arranged to meet at the park where he used to push me on the swing's neutral ground where Diane couldn't interfere. But somehow, she found out. As I sat on a bench waiting for him, a commotion erupted in the parking lot. Diane had followed Howard, screaming accusations, trying to physically prevent him from meeting me. "She's brainwashing you," she shrieked. "Don't you see? She's trying to destroy our family." Howard looked between us, his eyes clearing more each second. "Our family," he said quietly. "You mean the family where my daughter was branded a thief and exiled, where my wife died alone, Because you convinced me she was poisoning me against you, where my retirement savings have mysteriously vanished. Diane's face went white. She hadn't expected him to piece things together so quickly. That's the medication talking, she tried. You're confused. But Howard shook his head. No, Diane. For the first time in years, I'm not confused. I'm seeing clearly. The confrontation escalated when Brett arrived, probably called by his mother. He immediately got in my face, breath reeking of alcohol, threatening me if I didn't back off and leave town. That's when things got physical. He grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises and tried to drag me toward the parking lot. But Marcus's associate, who'd been watching from a distance, intervened. So did several other park visitors who recognized what was happening. The police arrived within minutes, and this time Brett's bail was revoked. As they led him away, he screamed threats that would later be used against him in court. Diane tried to follow, but Howard stopped her. Go home, Diane, he said firmly. Pack your things, it's over. The legal battles that followed were like something out of a prime-time drama series. Diane, unable to afford a reputable lawyer after her accounts were frozen, hired a cut-rate attorney who seemed to believe that volume could make up for lack of evidence. They filed motion after motion, each more desperate than the last. She claimed the deed transfer was forged, that my mother was mentally incompetent when she made it, that I had exercised undue influence. She demanded Howard be tested for competency, hoping to prove he wasn't capable of making decisions, not realizing this would actually work against her given the medication evidence. She even tried to get a restraining order against me, claiming I was harassing her while simultaneously stalking my every move. The situation divided not just our immediate family, but the entire extended clan. Howard's siblings, my aunts and uncles who had been kept away by Diane's manipulation, finally learned the truth. Uncle Robert, a retired judge, was particularly incensed. I knew something was wrong when Diane wouldn't let us visit, he said. She always had some excuse. Howard was too tired, too sick, too busy. Now we know why. They rallied around Howard and me, providing witness statements about Diane's isolation tactics and their concerns about Howard's declining condition coinciding with her presence. But Diane's family fought back, showing up at the courthouse, at Howard's doctor appointments, even at my hotel, making threats and causing scenes. The media picked up the story after Diane's arrest for harassment made the local news. Elderly man's daughter saves him from alleged black widow, read the headline in the local paper. Reporters started digging, and what they found was a gold mine of scandal. Diane's past victims began coming forward, sharing their stories of financial ruin and family destruction. The story went viral when a true crime podcast picked it up, interviewing several of Diane's previous victims. My business partners, initially concerned about the negative publicity, now saw me as a hero who saved her father. The narrative had completely flipped, and Diane couldn't control it. Then came the revelation that broke the case wide open. Marcus's continued investigation uncovered the smoking gun. Diane was still legally married to her second husband, William Mitchell, a man now residing in a Nevada nursing home. His children had been fighting for years to gain conservatorship, blocked at every turn by Diane's legal maneuvering. When they learned about Howard, they immediately contacted us. She did the same thing to our father, William Jr. told me over the phone. Isolated him, drugged him, stole everything. We have all the documentation, medical records showing the same medication pattern, financial records showing the theft. We'll testify to everything. This meant Diane's marriage to Howard was invalid, void from the beginning. She had no legal standing as his wife, no claim to any marital assets, no spousal rights whatsoever. Mr. Peterson was almost giddy when he filed the additional motions. This changes everything, he said. She's not fighting as a wronged wife anymore. She's just a con artist who's been squatting in your house. The judge agreed, expediting our case given the new evidence. Diane's lawyer, realizing he was on a sinking ship, withdrew from representation, leaving her to scramble for new counsel. Brett's downfall came swift and hard. The investigation into Howard's business revealed a decade-long pattern of embezzlement that was staggering in its scope and stupidity. He'd been siphoning money through fake vendor accounts, submitting false invoices, and pocketing cash payments meant for the business. But he wasn't smart about it. He used the same bank accounts, kept records on the company computer, and spent the money in ways that were easily traceable: new cars, gambling debts, drugs. When employees learned about the investigation, they came forward with their own stories. Brett had been selling inventory out the back door, dealing drugs from the loading dock, even using the delivery trucks for his side businesses. The forensic accountant hired to review the books found over $400,000 missing over 10 years. But that wasn't the worst of it. Brett's gambling debts had attracted the wrong kind of attention. The people he owed money to started showing up at the business at the house making threats. One afternoon, two large men in expensive suits visited Howard at the store, politely explaining that Brett owed them 6 figures and payment was overdue. They weren't threatening Howard directly, but the implication was clear. When this information was provided to the police, Brett's charges escalated from simple embezzlement to potential RICO violations. His arrest this time was spectacular. The police, aware of his previous behavior and flight risk, coordinated with federal agents to take him down. They surrounded him at a gas station, where he was meeting with one of his drug connections, caught with both illegal substances and stolen merchandise from Howard's store in his trunk. The arrest was captured on multiple cell phones and quickly spread across social media. Brett, realizing he was facing serious federal time, decided to flip on everyone to save himself, including his adoptive mother. Melissa's scheme backfired in equally dramatic fashion. Unbeknownst to her, when she attempted to blackmail me with the edited recording, she had used her home computer, the same one she used to file her fraudulent disability claims. When the FBI executed search warrants related to Brett's case, they seized all electronics in the house. Not only did they find her blackmail attempt, but years of evidence related to disability fraud, tax evasion, and identity theft. She had been collecting benefits while working under the table, claiming her children on taxes despite their father having custody, and using stolen credit card information for online shopping. Her dramatic live streaming of the eviction backfired when viewers noticed inconsistencies in her story. Eagle-eyed social media users found her old posts bragging about expensive vacations and designer goods while claiming to be too disabled to work. They found videos of her dancing at clubs, playing sports, and doing all the activities she claimed her severe back injury prevented. The viral exposure led to her losing custody of her children permanently when their father's lawyer presented the evidence to family court. The children, it turned out, were relieved to go with their father, later revealing the neglect and chaos they'd endured in Diane's household. Howard's health crisis came suddenly, but in a way was a blessing. The stress of everything caused what doctors called a mini stroke, but it led to comprehensive medical evaluation that revealed the extent of Diane's abuse. Brain scans showed damage consistent with long-term overmedication. Blood tests revealed dangerous levels of psychiatric drugs he'd never been prescribed. But most importantly, it got him into a protective medical environment where Diane couldn't reach him. As he recovered with proper medical care and genuine support, his clarity improved dramatically. He began remembering things Diane had made him forget: conversations with my mother before their divorce, warnings from friends he'd dismissed, moments of doubt he'd suppressed. From his hospital bed, he gave a deposition that was damaging to Diane's case. He detailed how she would give him special vitamins that made him sleepy and confused, how she would have him sign papers when he was barely conscious, how she systematically cut him off from family and friends. He remembered her meeting with strange men while he was supposedly napping, overhearing phone conversations about moving money, finding documents with his forged signature. His testimony, combined with the medical evidence, painted a picture of elder abuse that was hard to refute. The courtroom drama that unfolded was beyond anything I could have imagined. The eviction hearing, which should have been straightforward given the clear ownership documents, turned into a circus when Diane decided to represent herself. She showed up in court dressed like a grieving widow, complete with a black veil, apparently forgetting that Howard was very much alive and that their marriage was invalid. She'd prepared a dramatic opening statement filled with accusations that I was part of a conspiracy involving the mafia, the CIA, and surprisingly aliens who had brainwashed Howard against her. Even the judge, known for his stoic demeanor, couldn't hide his bewilderment. "Your Honor." Diane began, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "This is a clear case of elder abuse, but not by me. My stepdaughter has used mind control techniques she learned in California to turn my husband against me. She's planted false evidence, bribed officials, and probably murdered her own mother to steal this inheritance." The gallery erupted in whispers and poorly suppressed laughter. The judge called for order, then asked Diane if she had any actual evidence to support these claims. She produced a stack of papers that turned out to be printouts from conspiracy websites, photos of me taken from Brett's stalking expeditions, with red circles drawn around random objects, and amazingly a letter from a psychic claiming I had dark energy. Mr. Peterson didn't even need to work hard to discredit her. He simply presented the deed, the proof of Diane's bigamy, the medical evidence of elder abuse, and the financial records showing theft. Each piece of evidence was like another nail in Diane's coffin. She tried to object to everything, citing laws that didn't exist and precedents from TV shows. When the judge finally ruled in my favor, confirming my ownership and ordering immediate eviction, Diane lost all composure. She screamed that the judge was corrupt, that the whole system was rigged, and that she would appeal to the Supreme Court of the world, which of course doesn't exist. Security had to escort her out as she continued ranting about conspiracies and threatening to expose everyone's secrets. The criminal charges came down like dominoes after that. Diane was charged with bigamy, elder abuse, fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The federal prosecutors, armed with evidence from multiple states and victims, built a RICO case that was devastating. Brett, trying to save himself, testified against her, revealing the full extent of their schemes. He detailed how they'd targeted elderly victims at senior centers and social clubs, how Diane would research widowers with assets, and how they'd systematically drain accounts and isolate victims from their families. His testimony was damning, but it didn't save him from his own charges. Melissa's testimony was supposed to help her get a lighter sentence, but she couldn't help herself. On the stand, she tried to play victim and villain, simultaneously claiming she was forced to participate, while also bragging about how clever their schemes were. She inadvertently revealed additional crimes they'd committed, including insurance fraud and money laundering. The prosecutor thanked her for her helpfulness, as she essentially convicted herself of crimes they hadn't even charged her with yet. Her children's father was in the gallery, shaking his head as she destroyed any chance of ever seeing her kids again. The trial revealed the full scope of their criminal enterprise. Over 15 years, they'd defrauded dozens of elderly victims across 5 states, stealing millions in assets. They'd left a trail of broken families, depleted retirement accounts, and premature deaths that, while not directly provable as murder, showed a clear pattern. The forensic accountants found offshore accounts in multiple countries, shell companies used to hide assets, and a network of accomplices who helped facilitate their crimes. The investigation expanded to include lawyers who'd helped create false documents, doctors who'd provided inappropriate prescriptions, and even a funeral home director who'd helped fake death certificates. But the most shocking revelation came from Grace's diary, which I'd found hidden in her safety deposit box. Page after page detailed her investigation into Diane, her attempts to warn Howard, and her fear for her life. She wrote about confronting Diane, who had threatened to kill me if Grace exposed her. She documented suspicious incidents, brake lines cut on her car, mysterious illnesses after eating at Diane's house, strange men following her. The entries painted a picture of a woman under siege, fighting to protect her family while battling her own declining health. The final entry, dated a week before her death, was chilling. "If something happens to me, know that it wasn't natural. I've done what I can to protect Ladonna. The truth is in the box. This diary prompted a reopening of the investigation into Grace's death. While she had been sick with cancer, the autopsy revealed unusually high levels of the same medications used on Howard. The cancer might have killed her eventually, but evidence suggested her death was accelerated. While they couldn't prove murder, it added another layer to Diane's charges and showed the true evil of her nature. My mother had died trying to protect us, gathering evidence until her final days. Her sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. The victims began finding each other, forming a support group that grew to over 50 members. They shared stories, pooled resources for civil suits, and provided mutual support. William Mitchell's children flew in from Nevada to attend the trial, finally able to confront the woman who'd destroyed their father. Martha Stevens from Florida, whose husband died suspiciously after changing his will, testified via video link. Robert Chen from Arizona, who'd lost his life savings, flew in at his own expense to see justice served. The courtroom was packed with victims and their families, all waiting to see Diane held accountable. The verdicts, when they came, were decisive. Diane was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 40 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. The judge called her a predator of the worst kind, preying on the vulnerable and destroying families for greed. Brett received 25 years for his role in the conspiracy, plus additional time for drug trafficking. Melissa got 10 years for fraud and blackmail, with the judge noting her complete lack of remorse. The courtroom erupted in applause as they were led away in shackles, Diane still screaming about appeals and conspiracies. The aftermath of the trial brought a mixture of relief, sadness, and unexpected hope. The house, my childhood home that had seen so much pain and betrayal, stood empty and somehow cleaner despite needing massive renovation. I hired contractors to restore it, not to live in myself, but to transform it into something meaningful. Every room held memories, some beautiful from my childhood, others tainted by recent events. As walls were torn down and rebuilt, I felt like I was symbolically rebuilding my own life and honoring my mother's final wish to protect and reclaim what was rightfully ours. Howard, free from the toxic influence and proper medication, slowly returned to himself. The man who had thrown my suitcase into the snow was replaced by someone humbler, sadder, but ultimately recognizable as my father. He chose to move into a senior living community not because he needed to, but because he wanted the structure and social connection. "I need to learn how to make better decisions," he told me during one of our weekly lunches. "I need to be around people who won't let me isolate myself again." Our relationship would never be what it once was, but we were building something new based on honesty and mutual respect rather than blind trust. The legal resolutions extended beyond criminal convictions. Civil suits were filed and won, though recovering money from offshore accounts proved challenging. Diane's assets were seized and distributed among victims, though it was a fraction of what was stolen. The house in Nevada that belonged to William Mitchell was returned to his children. The various properties and assets accumulated through fraud were liquidated. I donated my portion of the recovery to the victim support group, having already inherited what my mother left me. The money meant less to me than seeing justice served. The victim support group evolved into a formal foundation dedicated to preventing elder abuse and supporting victims. I served on the board, using my business experience to help grow the organization. We created educational programs for seniors about recognizing manipulation tactics, worked with law enforcement to improve investigation procedures, and lobbied for stronger elder abuse laws. The foundation was named after my mother, the Grace Foundation, honoring her courage in fighting back even when she felt most vulnerable. Howard became one of our most powerful speakers, sharing his story at senior centers and community events. Through the foundation work, I met David, the forensic accountant who'd helped unravel Diane's financial web. He was kind, patient, and had a dry sense of humor that helped lighten heavy moments. Our professional relationship slowly evolved into friendship and then something more. He understood the trauma of family betrayal, having experienced his own version with a brother who'd embezzled from their family business. Together, we found healing in helping others avoid what we'd experienced. Love wasn't something I'd expected to find in the midst of chaos, but there it was, quiet and steady and real. The house transformation was completed a year after the trial. Where once there had been rooms full of lies and manipulation, there were now bright spaces designed for healing and hope. I'd converted it into transitional housing for elder abuse victims who needed temporary safe shelter while rebuilding their lives. The kitchen where Diane had poisoned my father now served healthy meals to survivors. The living room where she'd isolated him from family became a gathering space for support groups. My old bedroom where she'd planted stolen jewelry housed a counselor who helped victims process trauma. Every space was reclaimed and repurposed for good. Letters from prison came occasionally. Diane's were full of rage and blame, claiming I'd destroyed her life, that she was innocent, that karma would get me. I never responded, just forwarded them to the authorities as required. Brett's letters were different, desperate attempts to convince me to advocate for his early release, promising he'd changed, that he was just led astray. Those went unanswered too. Melissa never wrote, though. I heard through legal channels that she'd been assigned to kitchen duty and was apparently terrorizing everyone with her complaints. The other inmates, many of whom had been victims themselves, didn't take kindly to someone who'd preyed on the elderly. Standing in the garden behind the house on the second anniversary of that snowy December morning, I reflected on the journey. The spot where my suitcase had landed was now a memorial garden for my mother, filled with her favorite roses and a bench where visitors could rest. The elderly residents who lived here temporarily often sat there, finding peace in the beauty that grew from pain. I held David's hand as we watched the sunset golden light streaming through branches that had witnessed both betrayal and redemption. That evening at our weekly family dinner, Howard raised his glass of apple juice for a toast. To Grace, he said, his voice steady, who loved us enough to save us from ourselves. We clinked glasses, a small gathering of survivors and supporters. Uncle Robert and Aunt Susan were, their relationships restored after years of Diane's interference. William Mitchell's children had flown in for the anniversary, now dear friends united by shared experience. Several Foundation board members joined us, each with their own stories of survival and triumph. You know what I learned from all this? Howard said, looking directly at me. Family isn't about blood or marriage certificates. It's about who shows up when the snow is falling and your world is crashing down. It's about truth, even when it hurts. And sometimes, he smiled sadly, the greatest inheritance isn't money or property. It's the strength to stand up for yourself and the wisdom to know that real family, the kind that matters, they're the ones who help you up after you fall, not the ones who push you down. The room fell silent for a moment, everyone absorbing the weight of his words. Then conversation resumed, warm and genuine, the sound of real family, chosen family, survivor family. Outside, snow began to fall again, but this time it felt different. Instead of cold betrayal, it blanketed everything in quiet peace. The house that had seen so much pain was now filled with hope, laughter, and the kind of love that comes from shared understanding and mutual support. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I found myself in my mother's memorial garden one last time. The snow continued to fall, gentle and cleansing. I pulled out the last letter she'd ever written me, one I'd kept private, reading it by the soft glow of garden lights. My dearest daughter. It said, if you're reading this, then you've won. Not because you defeated Diane, but because you didn't let bitterness destroy your beautiful heart. Stay strong, stay kind, and remember, the best revenge is a life well lived. All my love, Mom. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it back in my pocket, and headed inside, where David was making hot chocolate and Howard was teaching one of our residents how to play chess. This was my inheritance, not just a house or money, but the ability to transform pain into purpose to build family from the ashes of betrayal, and to honor my mother's memory by helping others find their own strength. The woman who had thrown my life into chaos was behind bars, but more importantly, I was free. Free from anger, free from the past, and free to build a future filled with the kind of love that no amount of manipulation could ever destroy. As I close this chapter of my story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to stand up to a family member who was hurting others? How did you find the strength to do what was right, even when it meant losing people you loved? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if you found value in my story, if it gave you hope or strength, or just the knowledge that you're not alone in dealing with toxic family members, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of survival and triumph. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for yourself, that family isn't a license to abuse, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is protect yourself and others from those who would cause harm. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you are stronger than you know, braver than you feel, and worthy of a life free from manipulation and abuse. Until next time, stay strong and stay safe.